We'll be talking more about this with our panelists, and we want to hear also from you. You can head over to a Twitter handle, which is AM Live and TV. AM Live and TV also is a profile name on Facebook, and 20505 is our SMS portal. Let's just begin with Mary. Mary, when we talk about corporate culture, what do we understand by corporate culture? Just as to act as a segue to a discussion before we take a short break, yes.
I think corporate culture is really the informal system, an organization or even a group, because corporate is a group.
Yes.
It can be a group of people, a family, a company, a parliament, a leadership team. You have the formal side of the business, which are the systems, the procedures, your recruitment systems, things that are tangible and defined. And the culture side is the informal things. It's how the people behave, what they believe. And it's composed of two things, the values and then the norms, which are really the behavior. So you can say this is our value, but how do people really behave? So that behavior that permeates through the system and causes people to act in a certain way, to believe certain things, to dress in certain ways, to react in certain ways, that is a culture. Is there a welcoming culture? Is there a friendly culture? Is there a customer-oriented service? Or is it words? We say we are very good at this, but what's the real behavior? So it's really the values, and a lot more is you can have values stated, but how do people behave? What are the norms when you go into that place? So really, for me, I would say it's like the lifeblood of a corporation, because it's the intangible bits that makes a company either very successful or not successful. When you have a good culture, it energizes the employees and the staff of that group. When you have a negative culture, it can really doom a country, a company. And we've seen what happens when you have bad cultures with the big scandals you have of companies, whether it's Wells Fargo, whether it's Enron. When you have a bad culture that permeates through the system, people don't behave in certain ways. They don't live out the values of that company, then bad things happen. So there's a study done by Duke University a year or two ago, and it really did find that it was done on 1,900 CEOs and CFOs around the world, and it had about 20% of companies whose market capitalization is on the US stock exchanges. And it found that without doubt, over 90% felt that corporate culture was most important or very important, and most felt it was most important. And in fact, in a range of ranking between strategy, plan, finance, the CEO, it was the single most important thing. And it is very difficult to define, but it's what, for me, is like I said, it's the lifeblood of a company. Somebody said that it's like the music sheet.
Yes.
You can have an orchestra, but if they're not reading from the same music sheet, they may be the best trumpeters, the best violinists, you will get terrible music. But if you have one core sheet of music, they can play the most beautiful music. So I think that's the way I would tend to describe it. But very difficult to define, but you see it and you feel it in an organization. All
right, it's very difficult. So we can say there is no really an ironclad definition to corporate culture, right? But of course, you give a sentiment that it is very important. It is the lifeblood of a corporation.
Yes,
Thank you very much. Let's hear from Dr. Wale Akinyemi.
Well, I totally agree with everything that was said. The corporate culture is the belief, I think it's a belief system that influences the behavior. It's a belief system that ultimately influences decisions in an organization. Maybe to break it down, let's go outside the context of an organization. And because this is an area that I've done a lot of work on, and I think an example I like to use is a polar bear. Now, you live in Nairobi, you like polar bears, and so you decide, you know what, I'm going to get myself a polar bear and bring it to my house in Nairobi. You have all the money to bring it in. You have trained personnel who understand polar bear psychology or whatever. You have the equipment to bring it in. You have everything. Then you bring your polar bear into Nairobi. You have a party to celebrate your polar bear. And then 2 days later, it dies. Why? If you have everything right, if you don't have the right environment, it will die. And that is the relationship between culture and strategy. Everybody, they have great strategies, the polar bear. They've trained people, they have equipment, they have everything. All right? So they bring in the polar bear, which is the strategy.
Yes.
But you bring in the polar bear to an environment that cannot support polar bears. And so ultimately, the polar bear dies. And that is what has happened to strategy in too many organizations.
So the strategy is not really matching or in tandem with the environment, right? So it is not really bound to succeed. If the environment is not really conducive for this, yes.
People, people will call people like us and say, we want our team to be innovative. We want our team to be dynamic. Have you noticed that virtually every company has the same values? Teamwork, innovation, professionalism. It's all the same.
It's a copy paste.
So they have all that. But what they don't realize is that, you see, they say, we want our team to be innovative. That is an effect. What culture is the cause. The environment that will make that behavior a natural progression.
All right, thank you. Let's hear from Ondeng. Good morning.
Good morning, Debarl. It's good to be back here again.
Good to see you.
After some time. So far, I think we're all singing from the same song sheet, In fact, you could probably just have one of us handle the rest of the program. Because corporate culture is a very important discussion. Culture, generally, it's who you are. It's like Mary has said, it is what defines how you act, how you do what you do. And within the context of an organization or a family or a nation, you can be very busy trying to change behavior, trying to come up with rules or trying to come up with policies and things that will change without actually going down to the root of what the problem is. And the problem or the issue is usually in what you think, how what you have carried from previous generations, which is an important thing also, that culture, whether you call it corporate culture or social culture, it is created, it can be learned, it can also be changed. I think that's an important thing to take away from today's conversation, that we can change our culture, we can change how we frame who we are, and therefore change how we behave.
All right. And of course, even there, with the change, it can be a tripping wire as well. As much as we want to infuse new culture, resistance to change as well within corporates is another dilemma that also needs to be handled very critically. Right, let's hear from Maurice Mashiwa. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I think my three colleagues, I've had the first run. In my humble view, culture is the bedrock of our existence, whether it be in business, academics, research, or anything else. Culture is the lifeblood of that which we are. So even before you begin to speak of the corporate element of it, which becomes an organized way in the wider society, what is it we call culture? So that Mary talks about, the orchestra, so the music, that sheet we're reading from. A huge chunk of it that informs this culture thing is the intellectual acumen, so that we pump into the environment where we discuss culture. So then you begin to talk about typical case. What is distinct and preeminent, for example, about the Japanese? So we'll get to know, there is something about time. See that? So what is it they have done about time? They have something unique. For example, the Germans, with the engineering, processes. You get to know, they promise you buy a Mercedes, it is elegance in motion. What is that statement? It's a statement about culture. So that, so simple, yet so deeply rooted in the intellectual acumen, the knowledge acumen that shapes the way we do the things we do. So culture, from a wider social perspective, economy is about culture. You get to pull it, into a context where you now organize it around Coca-Cola, Nation Media Group, State House, Serrano Africa, so that University of Nairobi. Then you begin to contextualize the different phases that shape culture.
So before we took a short break, they just gave us a snippet of what the corporate culture is all about. Now, of course, we have Maurice Mashiwa, who's on the podium right now to talk to us about corporate culture this morning. He has 6 minutes, and of course, midway, I'm going to lift my bell just to warn him that, yeah, he's midway in his speech delivery, and if he goes beyond, I'm going to ring the bell as well. So, Maurice, you've got 6 minutes, beginning now.
Thank you so much, Debarl, and good morning, Kenya. I think, as we have already started the conversation, corporate culture, without going into the important question, what is corporate? I want to, jump that phase, because we all know what a corporate is, and look at what shapes culture in an organized, environment. Up front, there is the inevitable issue of vision. What are the founders' vision? So that, and the values with which, they seek to pursue the purpose, which is what vision is. I'll pick, an interesting, example. I grew up, Catholic. In Catholicism, there are, sacraments. One of them is called the Sacrament of Penance. It is a process. So, learning Catholicism, there is something, I was taught called preparing yourself for penance, for that sacrament. What does it do, that sacrament? We prepare ourselves to have an opportunity to reconcile ourselves with the sins we have committed and our Creator. So what happens? Catholicism has created a culture out of which people are able to edify who and what, they are. So a friend of mine, good Italian priest, said, I have been a very good painter over a long period of time. And as a painter who doubles up as a priest, my task is, I have excelled so well at that which I have been doing. And I hope that if God's key task, which is to forgive, if God is as good at his task as I have been at executing my task of doing what? Painting and preaching the gospel, then I need not to worry about what? What happens to me in the life, after I'm long gone. So what does that story indicate? It indicates 6 important things, which I think I should cover very fast. One is the question, what value do we attach to the things we do in organized environments? Big typical case, a university environment, where you have a large pool of highly educated people, the finest you will find ever anywhere. And yet, most universities, if not all, particularly in this part of the world, are in serious trouble. So why? Why don't we, for example, see a turnaround in how we, have, this pool of highly educated people, utilize the skills and knowledge they have to shape how society becomes? Because we have many young people in the hands of, these professors. So what culture do they go through in their learning process? Very important. That, in fact, the multicultural environment we call a university goes on to shape heavily, what young people, are able to pursue long, in the future. The other important thing, from our short story about, the priest and reconciliation is geography. Whether it is architectural design, whether it is, an out, play of, workplace environment, geography matters. Now, if you're in Nairobi, what is corporate culture in Nairobi versus what is corporate culture in, say, South Africa or in London or in New York? So, this thing we call geography, it is as important as time itself. So that in corporate environments, do we, for example, have, as in, these days we have an open office plan. What is the psychology that informs the architectural design of open office plans? Of course, there are issues, ranging from harassment, the female gender, and all these other things. And yet, that plays an important role in making flat, this hierarchy, corporate hierarchy, that you should be able to access, your senior CEOs and other people, relatively easily. So what does geography speak about the culture we are speaking, talking about? The other is the question, what is the story we have about our corporate, about our business, about our organization? Stories are very important. Pick typical case, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was enamored with the idea calligraphy. So that, how did calligraphy go on to shape, what we know today as the iPhone, the beautiful computer you're using? So there are certain things, while not intending, turn out to be, the lifeblood of, corporate culture. The other, I think, useful thing to mention is people. We have over and over, indicated and staunchly demonstrated that human capital is at the heart of what? Is at the heart of what an organization is, what a country is. So human capital. What is it that our corporates do about human capital? Now, in this part of the world, at the slightest challenge, what happens? Corporate onchos sacrifice their juniors. So you ask, so what is this value we have for our people, and yet we do not genuinely, and that is the key question, the sense of authenticity with which we're able to engage with our people internally. So that, others are seen as minions, those are juniors, who cares? So, that would then bring me to, a way of summarizing very fast. We have, in whichever organization, society, or country, or region, what I like to call a governance realm, a wider space within which things happen. That governance realm is shaped by two important, components. One, you have a structural dimension, which is what you call, the laws, the constitution for the case, the larger society, or articles, and memoranda of association, immediate, for a corporate. So that structural dimension creates several things. When we comply with it, what do? We entrench possibility of trust in an organization. So that we make it possible for people to be accountable within an organization. We make it possible, typical case, we had a scandal a few days ago, with the humanitarian, one of the largest humanitarian outfits. And those people, Oxfam, have an interesting vision. What is it? To create a just society free of what? Poverty. So what we saw, those scandals are themselves about poverty. So that. Then, so the structural dimension, then you have the actors dimension. Once a structure is created, it creates these positions, the hierarchy, vertical hierarchy. That vertical hierarchy necessarily have as what? As actors within it. So actors have power, have authority, then there's to be a sense of exchange, and reciprocity. So when you then figure out, how do we model this governance realm and how does it become important in our execution? So you have then to go to marry the strategy, so that, and the culture within which, we're able to do these things. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Maurice Mashiwa there. Of course, he asks a very pivotal question. Does vision also shape the corporate culture of an organization? That is what also we're going to be looking at as well. And does also the geography really matter when it comes to corporate culture, right? So will we call it corporate culture or a territorial culture? That is another question that also will spin or ask our panelists this morning as well. Up next, we have Peter Ondeng, who's on the lectern right now to talk to us about the same subject. We see how he'll slice it as well. You've got 5 or 6 minutes beginning now.
Thank you, and good morning, Kenyans. Last night, I watched a news item that really moved me, and I'm sure many of you watched it. It was a story of some matatu operators, a driver and a tout, who helped a woman deliver a baby. what was happening was this woman was in the matatu, and they're moving on, and she was sick, and they were a bit panicky about what to do with her. And so they decided to rush her to a maternity hospital. But on the way there, the water broke. And these guys decided, what are we going to do here? And as the guy explained it, I remember sitting back and thinking, wow, what if our whole society operated like this? What would it be like if we related with each other in this way? This, in an industry that often is talked about in negative terms, the culture, you talk about matatu culture, you think of something very negative. The subject of culture, and in this discussion here, corporate culture is huge. It's big, and in fact, we need a whole weekend or need a whole retreat to be able to discuss something like this. So in the few minutes that we're going to discuss this topic here, the slice that I want to take is not so much to talk about definitions and what the settings are in the corporation. There are people here who are much more qualified than I am to do that. I want to talk about culture as it touches me and you. Because culture, corporate if you want to call it, goes beyond the corporation. The family, the county, if you're talking about your NGO or even your church, operates in a certain way, people behave in a certain way, people relate with each other or collaborate in a certain way because of who they are. Oftentimes when we talk about culture, people think about utamaduni. You think about the music, you think about the food we eat, or you look at Dr. Wale here, the clothes he's wearing, you say he's wearing cultural attire. These behaviors and actions that we do are reflections of the culture that we have developed. They reflect, but they also emanate from that culture. They are not in themselves culture. Culture is, you could simply say, is the definition, is the conviction, the beliefs, and the values, as my brother has just said, that define or frame who we are. Who we are. And one scripture that I keep using wherever I'm going is, you are actually what you think. As a man thinks, so is he. And it is said, if you want to extend that, as a man continues, or a woman, continues to think, so he or she remains. If you want to change how I behave, change how I think. If you want to transform my community or my company or my church culture, change how we think. Be transformed by the renewal of the mind. What I'm trying to say here is that who we are and how we operate begins here and here, in the hearts and the minds. That is what defines who or what we are. I had some conversations not long ago with the current chair of our Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. This is Archbishop Wabukala. And he was telling me about just how much money, effort, and energy is spent trying to catch people, trying to correct, trying to convict people who have done wrong things. And I remember him saying, I wish we could spend the same amount of money, effort, energy changing how we think, what we believe, what our convictions are, so that our behavior can be different. You see, if we change this, we change this. And this is as true in a family as it is in a company. And I, for one, have grown up believing that in a certain way, I was brought up in a certain way, and it doesn't make my culture any better than yours. What it does is it makes it different than yours. The culture of the Kikuyu people in Kiambu, their convictions, their beliefs, their values, which may be very different from the Kikuyu of Nyeri. Their convictions, beliefs, and values shape not only how they see the world around them, but also how they see themselves. And how you see yourself also shapes how you relate and work with other people. How we spend so much energy and effort, and I've seen this in so many organizations, trying to get people to perform better, get people to have a better sense of excellence or become better performers. and spend a lot of time there as opposed to spending time in trying to create what it is that will emanate into this. So in really summing this up, because I believe we're going to have a conversation about this, culture is created. We create culture. And culture that we have, whether it's in my company or in my family, it is something that has come over time. Culture is also learned. We learn culture. I was not born thinking and believing in a certain way. I grew into this. But what's most important, and what I want to leave with us here, is that culture can change. We can actually change. And it's something that we can do deliberately, very intentionally, by defining what it is that we want to see as an outcome, and stepping back and saying, how do we change the heart, the mind, and those things that frame who we are, so that we can see a change in behavior and the actions. And once you've done that, you're in a position now to be able to define what structures and laws and things we put in place to reinforce what we have decided is the culture that we want to have in our organization or in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter Deng there. Of course, he says that culture is created, culture is a land, and culture can also be changed as well. So how do we effectively do that? And what would be the process of trying to inculcate a culture in an organization? So it does evolve, and of course we have taken the salient points that he's made, and we will be discussing that much later in the course of the program. Up next, we have Dr. Wale Akinyemi, who is the CEO of Pathos, also to take us through his thoughts about corporate culture. Well, we've got 6 minutes beginning now.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Good morning, everybody. Now, earlier on, I talked about the fact that culture is a belief system that influences our decision making. Now, let me give some very simple examples that I think will help us. I like classical music, and one of my favorite artists is a man called Mozart. Now, listening to Mozart, I realized that Mozart grew up in a home where his father was a music instructor. And so all his, right from the time he was born, that's all he was exposed to. And so at the age of 5, Mozart was composing. Now, miracle or coincidence? Then I bumped into a story of a man called Laszlo Polgar. Laszlo Polgar was a gentleman who believed that genius is made, not born. And he believed that any child born healthy can be made into a genius. So he decided he was going to use his daughter as an example. And he wanted her to be the greatest chess player in the world. Now, he was not a great chess player himself. So what did he do? As she was growing up, the only thing he exposed her to was chess and mathematics. By the time she was 14, she was a chess grandmaster. Now, not only her, his 3 daughters rose to the very, very top in chess. In fact, his second daughter became they're from Budapest in Hungary. And at a time when it was believed that women did not have what it took to excel in chess, she now became the captain of the Hungarian men's team, chess team. So we saw Mozart, we saw Polgar. Let's bring it to Nairobi. Now, if you're in your car and a matatu comes in front of you, cuts in front of you, you will get very, very upset, as we all do. Now, if you are in the matatu, do you know that the same thing that made you angry when you were outside would make you happy when you are inside? Because you're excited, this guy will get me to where I'm going in good time. Now, so what influenced the behavior of the matatu driver is the environment created by the passengers. Take a matatu driver who has never stopped at a red light before. Now, take him to an environment where red means stop, and very, very seriously, there are consequences. Now, just drive him around for a few days. Don't tell him anything, just drive him around and he sees how you operate. When you give him a car to drive, I can assure you he will stop at red. What are we seeing? We're seeing the power of the environment in influencing behavior. There was a research I was part of. You had these people, put them in a club, loud music, bright flashing lights and all that. Now, when they're talking, they talk loudly, they laugh loudly, or take the exact same people to another banquet hall, bright lights, classical music playing softly. When they talk slightly above a whisper. What am I driving at? You see, the environment we create will determine the performance we get. A lot of organizations are spending so much money calling people, oh, we want our people to be innovative, we want our people to be this. Now the question is that they should be asking, what is the environment that will make innovation a natural progression? And I'll give that free of charge. One of the environments that creates innovation is an environment where you can make mistakes, because innovation is the offspring of experiments. Now, so a lot of organizations, let me tell you another thing that happens is we have problems in the organization, and immediately HR, the default thinking is to do one of the most outdated things that you can do. It's called team building. So we take people to Naivasha, we do that to go and do tug of war and all that. Listen, if I hated you on Thursday before we went to Mombasa or wherever we went, the fact that we did tug of war and played some funny, silly games does not mean I will like you when we get back. In fact, I will hate you more if you defeated me on the field. Because we have not adjusted the environment that created the devil. So how do we expect things to change? We left a devil in the office on Thursday. We went to do tug of war. Then we come back to meet the same devil, and somehow we think things will change. It's not going to happen. So I began to ask, and there are too many examples. Somebody is at the airport in Lagos, and this happened to me. Years ago. Things are much better now. At the Lagos airport, it's fantastic now. But many years ago, it was not like that. So I'm standing on the queue, and somebody is taking right to the front of the queue. Then I wait again, another person is taking. So I'm thinking, you know what? I'm about to get angry. Then the third person is taking. So I convince myself, so that I don't get angry, that the reason they are not able to stand on the queue is probably they're not feeling well or they have some form of disability. Then I get to Heathrow Airport. I'm standing on another queue. Who is standing behind me? The same fool that could not stand in Lagos. So the question, why would you stand in London and not stand in Lagos? It's the environment that has been created. So what we need to do, instead of focusing on, and like Pete said, culture is another thing. Organizations say, oh, come and give a talk on culture. Culture doesn't change because you had a talk. The minimum time I normally, recommend is 6 months of continuously working. Now, another thing companies do, and I saw this with an airline, I won't mention which airline it is, many years ago, the airline was losing so much money. I'm not doing well. And one day I met this guy. He said, Wale, I know the problem with this airline. I said, what is it? He said, it is the logo. I said, what do you mean? He said, the logo is an elephant. So it will weigh down the airline, I said, my goodness, this is reality stranger than fiction. So they changed the logo to an eagle. And shortly after, the airline closed down. Because what we do, we want to rebrand everything outside, but we don't rebrand the thinking of the people. And these are the crucial elements of culture. So how do we change culture? I've been looking, because basically what we're saying is we want to change the way people believe. We want to change a belief system. And I found the answer in religion. every religion wants to take somebody who already believes something and change their belief system to a point where they imbibe a new belief system to a point where they can die for it. So if you understand how religion does it, you can do it in an organization. How does religion do it? Number one, there is the message. Every religion has a message. So what is the message of the transformation? Every religion has preachers. Who are the champions? The preachers who are going to be the go-to people that everybody is going to come and talk to. Say, okay, how do you explain this? And you know what? Faith comes by hearing. The message must be in the face of everybody all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wale. And of course, he's emphasizing on the need of having a conducive environment. And he says that the environment we create will define the results that we get. And also, environment where you can make mistakes is also very good for innovation as well. So, and a just environment that created the devil. And we are going also to be drilling deeper on that as well, much later in the course of the program as well. Up next, we have Mary Mukindia. She is a business consultant, leadership trainer, and public speaker. And as of 2017, also an executive leadership coach. And we yet to hear from her this morning also on her slice on corporate culture. What is it to her? Mary, got 6 minutes.
Thank you. Last, but lucky to be last, I can pick up on my fellow colleagues' points. Good morning, Kenya. Many of us get very annoyed at bad service. And you've just had Doctor also saying the same thing. For me, my particular peeve is Uber drivers. I love Uber service. I think it's fast, it's reliable. But one of the most irritating things, and many of my friends know this, is that you put in where you are, where you're going, and they have this Google map, but they'll still call you up. And when they call you up, they tell you, Sasa, Mary, uko wapi? I mean, we're not friends. The very essence of giving service and saying, you know, good morning, madam, or hello, customer, it's very, Sasa, uko wapi? Nije, unafanya, I don't know, I hate all that. So for me, what that tells me is that Uber are very good at getting you on time because you're told how many minutes it's coming, 5 minutes, 3 minutes. It gives you the distance and it's very efficient. But that tells me that Uber culture, and we saw a little bit when we heard about their CEO, is that the things that are important to them is the cost, because this very, you know, the cost is low, and that it's very efficient in terms of time. But in terms of service, of having an etiquette, of having clean cabs, of making sure there's no jacket in the back seat, that the car is clean, that the car is washed, that they push up the front seat when you come in, some basic customer service, that is not important to them. So while they may say, we value the customer, we want customer satisfaction, the very fact that they don't measure it, then it's not important to them. They're driven by the numbers. And I think this, when you look at culture, people will say, like Dr. Ali said, you know, we have, all the websites say the same thing. Our value is a customer service, our value is growth, we value people. But what do the people actually do in the offices? Because we said culture is a collection of self-sustaining patterns, feelings, behavior, thinking, and believing. So while you have all these systems, you have the formal system that tells you you recruit competitively, you have good ethical standards, there's no bribery. There's the informal bit, which is that culture, what you don't see. What values do you really have, and what behavior do you exhibit? And my view is that if you don't measure it and reward it, much as you may say that you have this and these values, you will not have that culture, you will not have that behavior, because it's not important, it's never measured. If you want to be an ethical company, then are you ensuring that you have systems that allow people to trust each other? You have systems that allow people to voice what is going on. You have systems where people feel able to criticize and report one another. If you don't have those systems and that ability, then much as you may say that we value honesty, zero corruption, toleration, and so on, it doesn't really matter. And my view is that these things start at the top. Leadership for me is a role. So everybody is a leader in their every individual capacity. If you're the driver, you're the leader. It's not the boss at the back who's driving. It's you decides the routes that you will take in Nairobi. It's you decides to stop at what traffic lights and how to drive properly. That's your job. But at the very same time, the leadership take a role. You have the board of directors that set up the policies and the governance structure. But the CEO and the top team, what you call the executive committee, the EXCO, the people reporting, they are the first avenue to say, we set the tone. What we measure, what we do is so important. And what we pay attention to, everybody will take a clue. We say, culture is, as we were saying, dressing. So how does a CEO dress? How does everybody behave? Do they say good morning? So for example, one of us talked about time and the Japanese. They value time. So they measure time. Time is very important to the Japanese and to the Germans. Cleanliness is very important to them. For us as Africans in our culture, time is not that important. What is important is a human connection. It is saying good morning in the morning. I had to learn that many years of being in corporate world, that actually people value that personal relationship. In Africa, if you don't say hello to somebody, if you don't greet them, that means you really don't care about me. How are you doing? How was your weekend? How is your wife? How's your husband? Somebody was ill. That's what's important to us. So we can show up late for lunch, for dinner, wherever we're invited. But when we're there, we're warm, we're friendly. So people say the African people are very warm, they're very friendly, because the things that are important to us are not those Western things. So it's the same thing in an organization. And one of the things I've said about leaders is that leaders must have several things. We have Aristotle, the Greek philosopher of the 4th century BC, who said that, and he tutored one of the greatest military leaders, who was Alexander the Great. He said a good leader must have 3 things. And this is something we actually teach at a module called Rhetoric Module, at a program I train on leadership at the Female Future, run by the FKE, the Federation of Kenya Employers, which says a good leader must have 3 things. 1, ethos. 2, pathos. And 3, logos. Ethos is the moral character, which will be the source of his or her ability to persuade and to inspire. So if a leader does not have a moral character that then inspires and, and enables him to influence people and persuade them, you're not going to have that culture that you would like to have. 2 is pathos, is the ability of a leader to touch feelings, to move people emotionally. Because people work for people. They don't work for organizations. I know we say, oh, I work for Kenya Airways, I work for Exxon. But at the end of the day, you actually work for your boss. You work for somebody because you like them. They make you feel good. They inspire you to rise up. So if you're not able to touch people emotionally and connect with them, and that's how you have some successful politicians, because they connect with people. So pathos is very important. And the last one is logos, which comes from the word, where the word logic comes from, is for an ability of a leader to give solid reasons for his actions and to move people intellectually. So you're able to say, hey, if we do this, we're going to grow by 30%. This works because of A, B, C, D, and you actually show them through logic what will happen. So for me, if we want to start changing organizations or groups of people, whether it's your family, whether it's a group of political leaders or whatever it is on a group level, for me it starts with behavior. You can't move people drastically. It's very hard. Kenyans, many years ago, we valued education. We valued teachers. And we rewarded them. And we said, mwalimu anakuja. Then through time and moral sight, we now value money. We value success, however you get it. So you can see where we've moved in terms of our behavior. Politicians can come and give loads of money. It doesn't matter where they came from the Harambee. So if we can start focusing on behavior, very small things, and say, I will say good morning to everybody every day. You're starting to move people. I will respect people. I will view them as my equal. I will be on time. You say, oh, we value customers, but you don't return their calls. So you start measuring, do you return calls to your customers? What is the return rate? Phones answered when they ring with the first, 4 rings. Do you start your meetings on time? Because we say, oh, we're a great company, we do this, we value time, we're efficient. But when people come for a meeting, everybody starts to walk in. 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later, people are still sauntering in, having coffee. Then you're not efficient. So for me, behavior and coming up with very simple rules of behavior. And that's why you have companies saying, this is a dress code, this is what we'll do. And emulating it from the top, and the top setting the tone is so important. And from there, we can start moving. So if we don't measure it, and if we don't reward it, then people are not going to exhibit the kind of behavior you want, which will eventually then make that culture a positive place to work with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Mukindia. And of course, she's raised a number of points that we'll also look at as well, measuring, our progress. Peter Drucker, the management guru, says what gets measured, get improved. So it is important that we do measure also how the progress of corporate culture is in an organization. And of course, also the attributes of good leader, ethos, pathos, and logos. She also expounded on that, and we'll be discussing that with our panelists as well. Remember, also you can cross over to our Twitter handle. AM Live NTV is the Twitter handle. AM Live NTV is the profile name on Facebook, and 20505 our SMS portal. And also you can call in right now and also weigh in your contribution, ask questions. Our panelists are here. This is a free consultancy, right? If you really want to learn about corporate culture, they're here. And of course, when you approach each of them, they'll charge you exorbitantly. But now you can take advantage of this as they're here this morning. Right, let's just get down to discussing this. And we begin from where we started with Maurice. You were up on the podium. You raised a lot of things that what shapes the culture of an organization is a vision. Why is vision so important? And how we know visions and mission statements. Does a culture of an organization, is it predicated on vision and the mission statements?
Thank you so much, Debarl. I want to use an interesting, organization, typical example, which, my teacher and, mentors famously described as the empire where the sun never sets. You know what that corporate is? Yeah. It's called Coca-Cola.
Yes.
So Coca-Cola at Atlanta, they have what they call the Coke Global Museum. See that? Mm-hmm. Now, if you look, you dig deep, the history of Coca-Cola and answer the question, you ask, what is this vision thing about? See that? So Coca-Cola tells you, whether you are in Australia or in, Harare, or you are, in the heart of Osaka, Japan, you will access a Coke very easily. See that? So, vision speaks to the purpose, the very, reason for which an organization is. See that? So, for those corporates that are authentic about what they call their vision, and that is why it is important to look up, what is it that inspired the founders to put together the vision they put together, in shaping corporate, an organization, a business. So the lifeblood of an organization is shaped by the vision collectively with its mission. Then the next dose you need to inject into those two things is the value network. What is the value system that becomes a core pillar that supports this vision? So that typical case. The African Union, for example, as body corporate, is now, heavily engaged in discussing the Africa we want in another 50 years, starting to 2013. This free, environment where, you and me can travel across the continent. What has happened to that vision? 2-3 weeks ago, we saw in Kigali, Rwanda, what happened? There is the Africa, Continental Free Trade Agreement area. So that agreement is an important addition to what, other people who are very familiar with aviation issues will tell you is the Yamoussoukro decision. Open up the African skies. So you have Air Nigeria, Ethiopian Airlines, Kenya Airways, South African Airlines, being able to move across, the continent. Mm-hmm. But the enabling environment to get that done had not been done. So how do you effect the Yamoussoukro decision? As body corporate, what we call, the Africa-wide, engagement, then you begin to look at, what are these useful values around which we need to shape how our society transforms? That then will ask you, the next set of, level of engagement, which is, what are the production systems, see that then shape our consumption patterns, see that. So you begin to ask, what is value? Who determines that which is useful? How do we think around economic value in the context of exchange value? See that? So we have use value, we have exchange value, and those find sense in the broader, setting where we say there is no economy without people, and without people there is no culture. So, even if we picked, Nation Media Group, what is the culture of Daily Nation? See that? So there are things that, it's things that are, are tied together from, right at the top to the very end.
All right.
See that?
Okay.
So that is why the question vision, particularly when you have a sense of authenticity that is single-mindedly focused on pursuing it, it's very important, because it is a starting point of saying this is what is going to become our culture here if we are going to achieve this vision.
Thank you.
I agree on the vision, on having, a very clear, deliberate. I think that Coke example, is it the one they say that a Coke within an arm's reach?
Yes.
But I'm not so sure about mission. I think there are a lot of missions that I never. But certainly you need to have a vision. That's why there's leadership. The mission always gets me very.
It's bad, but of course, mission and vision and mission statement, they're used interchangeably. Yeah, they're just pasted but
exactly.
Yes.
Used on websites. Thank you.
Could you actually just look deeper at the mission and the vision? How do we tell the difference? Because it seems all of these actually, they're coupled together. How do we uncouple them and have clarity and understanding when it comes to vision and mission statements?
You see,
let's hear from, we'll come to you. Let's hear from Peter Ondeng.
Okay. Debarl, I don't know how many times I hear somebody saying, I like my work, but I hate working here. It's very common to find people waking up on Monday morning, dreading going to work, because they do not actually feel that this place empowers them or enables them or brings the best out of them.
It's toxic.
It's a toxic environment. It's a very good terminology. And what I want to sort of leave behind from this conversation is that leadership is key to not just creating and forming, but also in changing the culture of an organization. It is so important to recognize that a leader cannot expect something that he or she is not. You cannot try to force people to be something that you don't yourself have. That is why leadership is so critical. Now, a leader, one of the critical things about leadership is getting people to walk with you and to go in the same direction with you. Somebody once said, you're not a leader if nobody's following you. So in many companies, many corporations, many, even the county governments or whatever, you find somebody who calls themselves a leader, but nobody's actually with them. And the environment that is being created or is created in that place is an environment where everybody is just doing their own thing, or people are just, unable to collaborate, inefficiency sets in, and so there's a lack of a common direction. This is why this vision is so important, which is directed by a leader. And I know leadership is at all different levels, but the leader, I'm talking here of the person who's charged with taking this thing, driving this organization forward. When I talk of culture, I want to just lift this a little bit, and I know I touched a bit on this earlier, to bring it to the national scale, because our organization, biggest organization here is us as a nation. And if we want to change Kenya, as many people want, because many people say, I wish things would be better, wish things would change, then we must talk about changing our culture. I don't want to sound like I'm taking a political position here, but let me use this illustration. The outcome of our recent elections, there are people who were agitating for change in our electoral laws. They're saying that we must have electoral reform, we must have. And I remember asking myself, is this electoral reform adding more laws? Is it if we add more regulation or add more policemen to man the stations? Is it get better technology? You can put 100 more laws in the books, but if we do not change our culture, if we do not change what we think and ultimately how we behave, we're not going to change anything. That really is the starting point.
Right, let's see from Dr. Wale.
Well, there are two components of culture, the visible and the invisible. A lot of...
But I wanted to get clarity on the vision. Does a good culture start with a vision or a mission statement? And what's the difference?
Well, let me tell you what a lot of... One says, this is where we're going. Another says, this is how we're going to get there. But the challenge is this, with many places, is that they have academic definitions. You see, and I'll give you a simple example. Let's take the word corruption. And I've asked this question everywhere I can. What is the definition? If, so like I said, everybody says teamwork, professionalism, and so on and so on. We need to ask, it's not the dictionary definition. What is our company-specific definition of teamwork? Okay? Let me give you an example. I was invited many years ago to be on a panel to recruit some top management positions for a bank in West Africa. Everything was okay. I had been sitting down, you know, people have been coming in, and then a cousin of mine came in. And when she came in, maybe if she had kept her mouth shut, it would have been okay. But the minute she came in, she said, ah, because I'd come in from the US. Wale, what are you doing here? Well, and she began to ask about my wife and my child. I said, ah, come on. So I told the other people on the panel, I said, you know what? It's obvious I have an interest here. I'm going to recuse myself from this. So I stepped out. And I thought that was the proper thing to do. I don't know. Is that the proper thing to do?
Or you
Okay.
declare it, and if they say it's fine,
So
you've declared it, it's okay.
So that's what I did. Now, later on that evening, so I get a call from an uncle who says, Wale, I hear the rubbish you did this morning.
Oh my goodness.
I said, what was that? He said, your cousin. No. Before she came for that interview, she had prayed and asked God for favor. God put you there as her agent of favor. You now walk out, you need to repent and ask your cousin to forgive you. Now, how do you deal with that? Is that because we do not have the same definition? Okay? Now, in a lot of African societies, when you're going to see somebody important, you go with a gift. So at what point, and this was part of the problem we had in Nigeria, at what point does culture end and corruption begin? You see, so what I'm saying is vision, mission, whatever we are talking about, we need to sit down. And I remember I was doing this for a particular organization here. It took us 1 week just on definitions. That as far as this organization is concerned, going forward, when we say teamwork, this is what we mean. And everybody gets it. When we say professionalism, this is what we mean. Until we have that, everybody, see, if you don't have a united definition, then it's subject to personal interpretation. I was in a place and senior management sitting around, and I just asked them, what is the... In fact, what I did was I put their mission statement on the screen, and I told them, I said, that's a mission statement for a company I work with. How many of you know which company it is? And I told them to write the company. And out of about 25 people, only about 4 people got it right. Because it is academic. And that is part of what is crippling culture in organizations.
All right, crippling culture in our organization of Mary, yes?
I think for me, what's really important, what I teach, what I share with boards that I work with or I train, and even the women that I in my full circle with Mary or at FKE, what I say is, who are you? Whether it's for an individual or a person, who are you? What's your purpose? So with a company like Coca-Cola, they're a beverage company. And, you know, sometimes people go into many things as companies. They lose their identity. You start doing this, you start doing this business. You end up dissipating your energy in very many things. So I think clearly defining who are you? What is your purpose? I know mine is to inspire people and organizations. Mm-hmm. How I do it is very many forums. So I think it's, first of all, is your purpose. Who are you? As an individual, as an organization, what is your core purpose? And then I do think the vision is important in that it allows you to be able to then say, what do I need to achieve that? It galvanizes people, and that is a leadership role, to say, look, I'm a beverage company, but I want to be the best beverage company in the world, or the biggest beverage company in the world, or the most liked beverage company. Then you look for the indices to measure that vision. Mm-hmm. So your Nation Media Group, we want to be the
Media of Africa. Yeah,
for
Africa.
Media
of Africa for Africa.
Yeah.
For Africa. Kenya is also be the pride of Africa. So what does pride mean? You define that and cut it into pieces, then you make. So I think having a vision is very important because people know why they're doing what they're doing. Yes, we're a beverage company, but this is what we want to do. Mission for me, it doesn't, you know, it's neither here or there. I'm never quite sure what mission does. But then management can actually be able to then develop a strategy on how to get there. You've told us as a board that you want to be the best, you want to be the pride of Africa, you want to be the biggest. That's your vision.
That's a vision, yeah.
Then how do we get there? So they will develop that. They will say, yeah, the strategy. They will come up with the resources they need, the people they need, the systems they need, whether they want to buy another company, whether grow organically, and that then you give approval to and you steward and monitor them on that. So I think what's important to know, who am I? What's my purpose? So that you don't end up doing too many things and trying to be all things to all the people.
So could be, as we take a short break right now and we come back, of course, we could be the vision is the where to. And the mission is how to, right? This is the where to we want to go, but how do we get there? Then that is the mission vehicle that will take us there. Maybe. Right? Could that be the difference? You help me understand. Yeah. You're the gurus in this, right? But we want to see, of course, also, Mary mentioned that, yes, if we don't really measure also the success of corporate culture, then how do we know that we're progressing? And as I mentioned earlier, we had Tom, or Peter Drucker, I should say, not Tom, saying that what gets measured gets improved. Yeah. We take a short break right now. When we come back, of course, we drill deeper on that and after other issues as well. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching the Leadership Forum here on AM Live. We continue with the conversation that appears here on understanding corporate culture. And before we took a short break, we were on you, Mary, talking about, and we said, yes, what really gets measured gets done or gets improved from Peter Drucker. Can we just emphasize on that, because you actually mentioned that in light of what we were discussing this morning? How do we measure corporate culture? I think there are many matrices, you know, of measuring things, whether it's your recruitment, your people, your behavior. For example, you know, customer service. A lot of organization, banks and so on, they actually measure the number of calls, you know, to try and reduce the number of calls that are coming in, complaint calls. You're measuring the time you pick up the phone. So you can develop indices that show whether, in fact, you're promoting the kind of behavior. And like I say, it starts at the top, they're setting the tone. Because, and we've been talking about this during the break, you know, leadership is formed within a context. You know, it happens between people and it aims to create value. But it actually is within some ecosystem. How are you operating? So if you're not actually measuring the things, you're only measuring money. Let me say this. I used to work for ExxonMobil for 17 years. And ExxonMobil was lean, efficient, analytical, procedure-driven. So there was very little time for creativity. It was not encouraged because it was about reports, it was about safety, it was about bottom line. That is what we measured. I've worked for the UN. We don't measure that at all. Time is forever. So it's a bureaucracy, it's heavy, it's not the output that you are. So in terms of the output, it's very low. So it just depends on what is it you're focusing on as a management. You know, safety, because we used to focus on safety, we used to have, were there any time-losing injuries? Were there any injuries at all in the organization? Even amidst, if you almost tripped on a wire, you reported it because safety was very important. Any injury, even your nail coming off,
was measured. You break a leg, you have to go to hospital. That's what we call a time-losing injury. If it's a fatality, it was reported right through to the US, and the MD had to fly to London to explain how we killed somebody, whether a contractor or an employee. It was a major thing. If you had accidents, even the sales reps, they were reported as incidents, and they were actually taken all the way through, because we had a target to have 0 incidents, 0 accidents, 0 time-losing injuries. And our sales reps could not travel after 6 p.m. in Kenya. When Exxon was here, they had to sleep wherever they found themselves, because the roads, we deem them as, you know, our roads and our number of rating in the world, you are not allowed to drive at night. And we would pay for that. So we did not have to, because the cars were loaned, you know, on loan to the salespeople. And if you had an accident, you've lost time, you've made a safety incident, and we're not safe. So those things were measured. So the issue of safety was so driven in anybody, and you had to report if you saw some wires wrong, you reported it, because we encourage that. So what I'm saying is, you look for metrics, you look for measures that can be able to talk about that behavior that you're trying to create, so that you have that conducive environment, whether it's for faulty reporting. Let's talk about this case we've just been talking about on fraud.
Yes.
What matrices were there? People must have known what was going on in this 7 billion fraud saga with KRA. It's not just the owner. There are people from doing the accounts, you know, putting in the numbers, the finance officer, the various people, the auditors. There must have been a whole trail of people who knew about it. So it is, if you've not got that value and that behavior, and the tone is not from the top, but even those people who are there not doing reporting, then you have this kind of thing. So I think we're all to blame. It's not just the leadership. Everybody as a leader has to blame. What you set your numbers in, what you count, is how people behave. So obviously for them, this was not a major issue.
All right. Let's say from Mashiwa as well, when it comes to corporate culture, and we can also talk about the issue of corruption. We go to so many organizations and they say this is a corruption free zone. What is a corruption-free zone? And do we have indices to measure really corruption, so that we know, yeah, this is corruption, so I have to avoid this within this particular zone?
I hate that sign.
I hate it, because you get there and, you know, what goes on inside is
Exactly.
different from what goes written outside.
You ask, is there a way of measuring it? Now, the World Bank, for example, has about 169.
The what?
The World Bank.
Oh, the World Bank.
You know, the pool of knowledge the World Bank has produced, therein they have, you know, what they say, say is an indices, of measuring governance. So that from social issues to political issues, of course they say they are political, to economics, to business environment and all, there are 169. So if you ask, is there a way? Yes, there is. So that question is, if you look at, what the Daily Nation has, on front pages, the face of 7 billion shillings, fraud saga. That gentleman is the face of it. See that? So what happens behind that face? See that? So for me, it is largely a question of, we are dealing with a fractured society. Now, in January this year, at Davos, the annual conference, at Davos, the annual meeting, World Economic Forum, a huge chunk of what was being discussed is, what is happening, in the world today, the economic, and major movers in a fractured society, this fractured, world. What is it? So one is a question. Leadership is influenced by history. So his company, for example, that gentleman, has been shaped by the history from where he has been operating. He didn't declare this 15 billion shillings.
7 billion.
Yep. I think the figure was, 15 billion, then out of it, should have been paying, 7 billion tax. So this didn't happen over a period of 1 month. So that it's something that has been happening over, an extended period of time. And as they say, there are these moments of truth that, we are confronted with, at every stage in life, where we have to, to come to terms with our mea culpas. So that moment of mea culpas then brings us to the question, take typical case, political governance. Take administrative governance and economic governance. Those three things, political and administrative, they get lost when you begin to discuss the interface of administrative governance and political governance in the name of the marketplace. See that? So what becomes the practice? So no free, this is a corruption-free zone. That space, that environment, that company, that corporate, that ministry that says, hey, this environment, I like going to the University of Nairobi because I, use the library a lot. You walk in, they say, this is a corruption-free place. See that? Now, what on earth is corruption? Beyond the little bribe thing of money, exchanging hands, there are a lot of other things in an environmental culture thing. The culture, at an at a place that clearly is corrupt. A chap will keep you waiting 2 hours. See that? When in essence you ought to wait for 20 minutes. That's part of corruption. See that? So how on earth do we then, understand, measure this and begin to chart, new pathways? Someone will tell you corruption really is not the in thing. And you're not going to end corruption in this part of the world. See that? If history, which has been documented so well, is anything to go by, in this country, whoever is very keen, on some of these things, the sad, story is, sorry. Why? Because 7 things militate against it. It is what, what I keep discussing with my friends, what we call the poverty of ideas. See that? So you have an environment where an individual, for example, because it is not, guns that kill. It is not, it is not the camera that steals. It is individuals who do it. See that? So you have an environment where someone over a period of time has been accumulating, resources. So they have parked 10 sleek Mercedes Benzes on their backyard. See that? And you ask, what is this about when you're operating in an environment where there is squalor and serious social deprivation? So it's part of what we discussed last time, the tragedy of what? Where do the mighty fall?
Thank you.
Well, I would disagree on the thing about ending corruption in this part of the world. I would tell you that the most corrupt nation in the world is America. There is institutionalized. The lobby system, the big corporates, the gun lobby, they just have institutionalized, and the way a lot of wazungus do. You clothe it, you give it a nice name, you call it lobby groups. Those are the people who determine the laws and the funding. Look what's happening across schools in America. They're removing money from the public schools in the private sector. They run the American politicians. They contribute to their PACs and their campaigns. And I'm sorry, that's institutionalized corruption and bribery. So just because we've not institutionalized and called it beautiful words, perhaps it's eradicating corruption in the world, which I'm not sure whether it's possible. But I would not say in this part of the world. We just do it more honestly and more openly, and you get better service and quicker.
I think we need to actually be very, very careful, because there comes a time, and I hope we don't get there. There comes a time when corruption becomes cultural and it becomes a key pillar of economic activity. That means corruption is actually needed. I'll give you an example. When President Buhari took over in Nigeria,
yes,
what he did, they blocked a lot of the holes of corruption. The former National Security Advisor stole $2.1 billion. These guys still. So President Buhari came and they blocked a lot of the holes where money was going out, being stolen. What was the direct result? We went into a recession. You know why? Because the guys who have stolen money, who are building houses, are no more building houses. Think of all the jobs that are created from building houses. All those guys have no work. So you had people now looking and saying, oh man, we want to go back to the good old days. Good old days meaning the time when corruption was widespread everywhere. The vice president gave a speech last week, vice president of Nigeria, and talked about a $3 billion chunk of money that had been recovered. And he talked about the roads and bridges that just $3 billion would do. Yet, these guys have stolen hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. So how do we, you have people saying a war on corruption and all that. There's only one way it can succeed. You have to deal with the environment that produces that corruption. Now the truth is, once you deal with it, like in the Nigerian case study, the first effect might appear to be negative, but ultimately we will move forward. How do we, and one of the environment that creates this corruption, as long as we celebrate pockets more than minds, we are going to have a problem. Somebody comes and, like you said, he has all these things, and you know his salary. His salary is in public domain. Mm-hmm. You know that this guy's salary in 100 years cannot support the lifestyle he's living. But you see, nobody asks questions. Once this guy is able to come and say, I'm giving to you. So it's basically, we celebrate the thief as long as he's our thief.
Yes.
Then we're all happy. Yeah. And that's one of the things we need to deal with.
Thank you. Let's hear from Peter then.
Debarl, if anybody tells you or gives you a quick fix solution to corruption, don't believe them. Corruption, however you want to define it, is so entrenched in our culture that it has become normal. In fact, it has become a culture in itself. And so we have sections of society who are shouting at the top of their voices that so-and-so is corrupt. And in many situations, it is only because they're not in those situations able to benefit from what those people are benefiting from. One of the things that is very disturbing is that money has become such an important value, and I think this is what is being repeated around this panel. It has become the number one and perhaps the only value that people pursue. We have in our Constitution a raft of values that we talk about that are supposed to be our national values. To be honest with you, if you stop anybody on the street, even the most educated, and just ask them what are our national values, yes, they actually won't be able to tell you those values, the majority. And those who have memorized them will not be able to actually tell you what they mean. Mm-hmm. And so if we want to change this corruption-driven value system, we have to go back to define in real ways what are the values that we want to hold dear. Just like we talked about, culture is created. I believe values, you can actually instill new values, and it must begin with the leadership. It must begin at the top. Mm-hmm. But it must also be something that is participated by everybody at all levels of society. Mm-hmm. You bring this into the organizational environment. This is, because here we're talking about corporate culture. And corporate culture meaning organizational culture. That is in the church, in the family, and so on. We must actually go back to not just establishing where we want to go, meaning our vision, but we must define what is right and wrong. Mm-hmm. And our definitions of ethics and corruption and so on is problematic because we have not agreed among ourselves that something is right and wrong. And if something is wrong, it must be clear to everybody that it is wrong, so that when you cross that line, it is understood that it is wrong. But if some people believe it is okay and other people believe it is wrong, we're going to have a situation where we'll never really resolve the problems that we're trying to resolve.
Right, Wale talked about adjusting the environment that creates the devil. And I'm wondering, we as a country, because also we had you, Mashiwa, really talking about geographical culture, which is basically a territorial culture. When someone really comes to Kenya, what sort of a culture does he perceive us as a country? What do we actually portray there as a nation, right? And I don't know if Wale is, you are the right person, because we know that, yeah, you cannot see the picture if you're in the frame, right? If you are not in the frame, then you can see clearly the picture. Now, you being, of course, a Nigerian, and you're here in the country, you can clearly see what the culture of Kenya is right now. How would you define or characterize our culture?
It is so simple, one needs help to miss it. Warm and friendly.
So
Anybody coming into Kenya, never been to Kenya before, get to the airport, the first impression you have, warm and friendly.
Yep.
And the second impression as you stay?
That's beyond my pay grade.
But I can add to that.
Yes, please.
And I had mentioned warm and friendly because those are the things we value in our culture. The other one I think is that Kenyans have a quirky sense of humor. We have an ability to laugh at ourselves in the most amazing, super way.
But an outsider must not join in that laughter.
Yes, absolutely. We will kill you. We will kill you on Twitter. Yeah. And you know, we have these things that happen. You know, the girl who had photoshopped herself somewhere, or the people who had gotten married on something. You know, whatever something happens, we put memes and things on this WhatsApp that goes around.
The Githeri media,
the Githeri man. We had these flags in Nairobi and elsewhere, and then people show people swimming in South Sea. We have a quirky sense of humor, and we're able to, even in the most serious, difficult situation, and I think to me that's a triumph, that even when things are tough, even when things are bad, we turn it into humor. And I don't know whether it's an English inheritance from having colonized by the British. We have a real ability to laugh at ourselves and draw humor in a situation even when it's bad, and I love that. I think that's a characteristic. But you were talking about matrix, and Pete talked about the national values, or you talked about the national values, and Datari, you talked about the World Bank having like 196 indices. If you look at the national values for Kenya and principal governance is patriotism, national unity, sharing and evolution of power, rule of law, democracy, participation. Then we have human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusiveness, equality, human rights, non-discrimination, protection of the marginalized, good governance, integrity, transparency, accountability. All of those, you could develop a matrix, or metrics, that you could actually measure. So if you want to have the behavior and the culture that brings out, you know, our national values, then if it's patriotism, what will you measure? Is it participating in national events, you know, serving in the, you know, national youth, or going to serve a fellow Kenyans, doing CSR somewhere, just for the sake of volunteering? So that would encourage a sense of, you know, participation, of loving your fellow person, of donating to others. And we have a lot of groups, lottery and all this that do. So you could actually have, as a national institution, be able to say, what things of patriotism did we go do for our fellow countrymen? If it's national unity, you could develop matrices. If it's inclusiveness, have you been able, in your employees at your place, do you have inclusiveness in terms of diversity and include even people who are disabled and so on? Non-discrimination or protection of the marginalized. Do you make sure that you protect them, you participate? So good governance, we know all the metrics of good governance. So even taking this, you could have metrics and develop them, and then say, as part of even meeting the business objective and so on, we want people to be patriotic. So every National Day, we will all go and sweep the street somewhere or give foods to whatever. That's a sense of patriotism. And all this you could actually develop matrices. And maybe those are the behaviors. Then if we start doing enough of, led by the leadership, then people start to say, oh, yeah, that's nice. I enjoyed that day. I enjoyed going to paint this children's home.
You picked the aspect of Uber, and I want just to throw this to all of us. Because, of course, we know Uber outsources most of their drivers. But when it comes maybe to that interface between the company and the outsourced company, how do you then, you might be having your corporate culture, but having it infused to the outsourced partner as well, it's diametrically different. And of course, the true reflection will come back to, you know, the primary company that actually outsourced these particular services. So when we talk about this particular company, and Uber is just a case, but we have many of them, but they don't have a true reflection of the primary company. These are our core values. Is it a disconnect of communication between the primary company and, you know, the outsourced company? Any of you can actually pick up on this.
They don't care.
Thank you so much. You know, that is a very easy one actually. It is a question, what is the business model and where is this ecosystem where this business model is being, you know, implemented? So what is Uber? It is an app sitting on your phone, you know, in the cloud. Around which a business, you know, has been developed. So the app operating, of course, you know, out of California, Wale talks about what is this environment. Where are they getting their drivers from in Nairobi? They're not importing them from Zurich. They're folks from Nairobi. So Uber only makes it easy for you and me and many other Kenyans to get access of, you know, that ride, and off they go. But these people who have, you know, bought vehicles, you know, and joined the Uber, you know, business model, what is their extraction? They are from this city. And what is the history from which they are coming? What is this business ecosystem where they've been operating, you know, the last 10, 20 years? So I would not, you know, belabor thinking about, Uber, whether they're able to say, you know, as you know, Mary said, you should say, you know, say good morning, you know, in an amiable manner. You know, it is the lugha ya mtaa, you know.
Sasa.
Hey, sasa. See that? So that is a question. When you get these people on board, what process do you take them through? So that, as you know, university graduate out of college, or maybe my first job, Debarl, you know, just to hold you for a second.
Yes.
I was taken through induction. That induction was to do what? To get me to understand the culture of Safaricom.
Yeah.
So what is that culture? So that now, corporates that, you know, really stand out are very keen on their process of recruitment. So that they say it is not, we can train for the skill, but we can't compromise on attitude. So that goes on to shape, do you fit into our culture? So the largest, you know, serious global, you know, consulting firms, from McKinsey, you know, to Brookings, what are they about? They are very keen on who, under the events, they get on board into their system. Some take a period of 2 years to recruit. Why?
Could I just add, you're absolutely right, but one of the ways that Uber could then get the behavior that they want is if they focused on it as a metric. There is, on that app, you rate people. You rate 4.8, 4.5, you can even go and see the history. But they've not connected that with what hurts, which is a pocket. So, yes, there are ratings, and you can know who is a highly rated driver, but it's whoever accepts your call. So if there was a way, for example, I'm just thinking out of the box, if you could rate that rating to the money that you then pay, so you connect it on a sliding scale, that the higher the rating, the more money you get, and the lower the rating, so that in the end it averages. Then there's an incentive for the driver to be polite. Like when I was in the oil industry, downstream trade, we used to have a card for petrol stations. You say, habari madam, or hello, you know, hello sir, nijaze, may I check your oil? And then asante, goodbye. You know, they don't say ngapi, you know? You're supposed to greet them and say jaza, because we want him to fill the whole tank. So there was a little card, they used to put in their pockets, English and Swahili. And you know, we then were monitoring what each sales rep, what each attendant is selling, and you know, the performance of that service station would have mystery motorists, and then would reward the dealer better, and he would then share that little bonus with the service station. So with the same with Uber, you're right that it's not important to them. They don't train them the way you are trained in Safaricom, and that attitude is not important to them. What's important is the money. But if they wanted to have polite drivers, clean cars, where, you know, they greet people in a certain way, link it to that rating, people will then participate. I never rate because I know it doesn't matter. But if I knew it mattered, And the drivers knew it mattered. My goodness, they would say, "Good morning, madam. Where are you? Where are you? Come in, thank you. Close the door quickly." So you can incentivize the behavior by focusing, measuring it, and then rewarding it. And that's the point we were making.
Right. Could we also maybe predicate or maybe add that also to what Lawrence Gidenji is asking here? Any views on promoting a culture of continuous improvement, right? We know the Japanese with the Kaizen system of, continuous improvement as well. If we are coming up with a new app, of course, there are learning experiences, wrinkles to be ironed out along the way. Could also maybe, and we're using Uber just as an example, truly, that yes, we have all these frustrations from the customer, but maybe when also they are outsourcing these particular drivers, there's no induction in the first place. There are no workshops on the expectations from Uber on how they want to treat their customers well. So workshops and clinics, could that also be a disconnecting factor? Maybe they missed or they jumped the gun. Peter then.
I think, Debarl, that's a very good point that who is it, Maurice?
Lawrence Gidenji.
That is raising, because it is a process. Nothing happens once. And as we're discussing this, I also have to correct myself from time to time and remind myself that we are a culture, as we are also a people that is different from, let's say, China or the United States. And too often, we do cross the line and begin to judge ourselves very unfairly because we use cultural norms and cultural practices from other places to try to determine whether or not we are good or bad. One of the things that I think all of us would agree on is that in terms of power plays, in terms of historical realities and so on, we as Africans are in a sort of a disadvantaged position. We, in relationship to other regions of the world. If you want to do business with China, you need to learn Chinese. You need to learn how they work, how they operate. If you want to do business with the Japanese, you need to understand how they operate, how they work, what they like, and so on. When they come to do business with us, we are the ones who have to change, to adapt to how they do business. So we have to learn their language. We have to operate with good English. We have to. So in many ways, we have lost also our identity. We lose our own self-value, and our self-perception begins from a negative place. So I'm just saying that as a correction, that how we communicate, how we operate with customers, how we actually collaborate and work within an organization should not be at the expense. Improvement should not be at the expense of who we are and what makes us very unique and different. And we need to celebrate. And I think maybe I'll close with this, that we need to have a continuous national conversation at all levels, defining and helping people to appreciate what is good, what is right, who we are, and what it is that we're trying to achieve. Because there is a frustration. I remember the now famous statement by His Excellency in State House, where now I'm talking about corruption, where he sort of threw his hands in the air and said, "What else do you want me to do?" Perhaps we could have stopped and said, well, what progress have we made? What else do we need to do? What more must we continue to do in order to address this? Because we can very easily come to a wall and say we can't change things, we cannot improve things. And yet life is really a journey of one step after another.
All right. And maybe also, just to also throw a monkey wrench into the works. First of all, we know the VW as well. We can just take that as a case in point. We have the Facebook scandal right now with the data scandal about, the use of data, of the privacy of the users. We know what happened also in America with the VW as well, when we had this defeating devices that were installed into their vehicles, and there was all these huge scandals. We saw also the CEO now also resigning because of that. If we have, such a weakness in the system of the corporate culture of an organization, and let's say they come to Kenya and we have a plant which is actually installed here to now, churn out all these VW vehicles as well. How are we as a country? Because you're saying we need also to reserve our own culture as a country. If we have China coming, we have our own values as well. They cannot come and superimpose their own values as well on us. How then is it that a country that so many people have raised accusatory fingers in terms of, you know, environment sustainability and the cheating devices, that without any scruples about, you know, the integrity, no one is really raising questions. So the question will be again, are those cars that were banned in the US having a dumping site in Kenya? Has anyone, even from either concerned ministry, really interrogated why we have these plants? Because we say, oh, you know, now we have all these plants coming here into the country, they create jobs, but how about the integrity and the sustainability of our environment here in the country? We have jobs, yes, but will we have people in the longer future who will work within this environment because of issues of you know, pollution of the environment, and we have sick people, sick working population. This is all about corporate culture. Yeah. Any of you can pick up on that?
Well, one of the contributing factors to this, I'll call it impunity, that you can actually, somebody can actually do something wrong. Are looking to the leaders with a sense of confidence, rather than just saying, just give me whatever you can give me. This is where this flipped around democracy of ours, where people are not, as it were, supporting the leaders that they want, but rather there's the leaders who are coming to buy the votes, or to convince the people that, you know, give me the leadership because I have the money. So this plays into this situation where people are pursuing things for self-interest, and there isn't enough pushback from society. There's not enough of people being held accountable, because people are accepting that this is the norm. You know, when you're in a situation that is negative, you don't actually realize it because it is how we live, and you stop asking for change. This is how I'd respond to you.
Right. Yeah. But could we just be specific also in terms of when we're talking about these scenarios, because we want to get also answers as well, instead of having generalities. Okay. Yeah. If we say this is a VW case that we have here in the country, and have raised that particular scenario, I've given you the whole scope of it, how will you respond to it?
I think for me is, you know, government is about people coming together and then electing a few of us to look after our common good as a group. So the role of government is to protect and you know, first one is to protect that public good.
Yes.
And then after that is to encourage growth and communications and all that. So typically, there are things that are done for the public good by the government. So they are the ones who have the NEMA authority for environmental. You don't dump your stuff everywhere. You have NTSA for this and that. You have the air traffic office to make sure that the planes are safe. That is the role of government. But I think that, again, it comes to culture. There's a culture within the government who, and I guess it came from a long time ago, where they want to do everything themselves because there's a mistrust of the private sector. So, for example, a little bit what I know about in the road transportation, because I worked with UNEP for some time on the road transport unit, but I was responsible for Asia and Asia Pacific, is that you want to be able to control the vehicles that are on the road. They must be follow a kind of an, you know, a check every 3 years or 2 years or whatever it is. Now, government wants to do that role and then also provide the oversight. Typically what you do, because government doesn't have the resources to do everything, you can appoint private sector organizations that can then do the certification, and then and the rules are done by government, they're developed by government, then government have inspections that go and check, are these people certifying the vehicles that they're roadworthy in the rules that I set them.
Yes.
And then I'm actually overseeing only, very many people doing work for me. But when you insist as a government that you want to set the rules, then you want to also do the action yourself. You cannot replicate yourself in all the 47 counties, in all the many towns in Kenya. You see what I mean? That's just one. For example, that MOT check. If you were to be able to release and say any garage in the country can do those checks, and here's a standard that you have to do. Each garage must have this, this, and that. These are the checks you're doing. You're doing brake failures, you're doing this, you're doing that at every single time. And then I check the garages and inspect them occasionally. And if you're not following the rules, I throw you out. You could then be able to create that public oversight much more easier. When somebody wants to set up a plant here, who is the authority that checks that that technology is correct for us? Are you with me? We may not have the knowledge, but there are international institutions that we could then use. The same way when you're importing goods into Kenya, there's SGS, there's Bureau Veritas, there's all these people. They have the ability to check, is this food correct? Is this medicine correct? With the international organizations that are independent and not from the companies. So sometimes we don't have to do the things ourselves as government. We can commission agents and experts and then have oversight. And I think that's where, for me, I sense that the ball falls through, because sometimes government does not trust private sector enough to say, you do this bit, I will do that bit. You create employment, you create the action, falling further into the country. I want to hold and do everything, and they're not able to. So I sense that we still have to put it at the government's door and say, what public oversight do they do, and how do they do it?
All right, yeah.
Thank you very much. On this, I have 3 things to mention. But the first is a simple question. What has government business got to do with engaging in business? What is the business of government? It's not to do private business for profit making, for crying out loud. Simple thing. Now, my 3 key things. Good intentions. See that? Now, if you look widely, in our society, look at the heart of Africa, the DR Congo. See that? The formation of the UN in 1945 spelled 3 things, for Africa. One was to help shape the liberation, process of Africa. 2, particularly for the Congo, because Congo is very unique. It's the only country that, attained independence, and within 1 month, you had the UN, troops deployed, in Congo. So what do you see? You have a liberation, process. You have partners in development process, but also partners in collusion. See that? So good intentions. What becomes the methodology and practice of good intentions? Second thing, the body corporate called Kenya. What is the bottom line for Kenya? This body corporate we want to call Kenya. What is the bottom line? So, if it is from strategy mapping, I'll tell you there are 4 key things. There is the financial perspective, bottom line issues. Then you have customer perspective. What is it, the corporate we call Kenya, and of course from the highest policy making level, cabinet, to legislature, how does that spring, all the way to the very bottom, of that pyramid? What is it about internal operations, in this body corporate we call Kenya, that would empower citizens who are sovereign, see that, to find pathways to live meaningful life? Then the last is, it's got to do with within this body corporate we call Kenya, learning and growth, which is where you have 3 important things. You have human capital, you have organizational capital, and information capital. Within organizational capital, you have the sub-important component we are calling culture, learning, teamwork, and related things. Now, 2 weeks ago, I had a very good conversation with my friend, Dr. Richard Munang out of the UN, UNEP, and we discussed the 5 important I's. Ideas matter. What is the value we have about ideas? If what we see in the newspapers, the Star, Nation, everything is Hey, there are serious questions about public what? Entities. So that, you know, in the Star there is an interesting story. You know, in Kakamega, MCAs think that because the governor is intending to withdraw, you know, what fund, then he's killing devolution. Is devolution equal money? So ideas matter. Then you come to innovations. What are innovations about? Society and its challenges, corporate or not, presents us an opportunity to innovate solutions to those problems. So how do we do it? Then the third thing is, what is the incentive matrix we have in this corporate environment to reward the good things? So back to good intentions. So that, how do we reward those that are, you know, trailblazers that are guiding us, so now we are going forward?
Thank you.
The fourth E is institutions. The fourth I, sorry, is institutions. So that, what is the culture, and institutions are this, you know, agreed to set of, you know, formal and informal, you know, terms of engagement that, you know, bring, you know, the reality of this body, you know, identity. Lastly, is the question, do we have an inclusive framework for implementing it? How do we implement? So we can have, you know, excellent conversations,
right.
but for example, we have this, you know, document here, which spells out the aspirations of this body corporate we call Kenya. What are we doing in implementing this constitution? What are we doing, you know, from what she read on the thing?
We're trying to amend it.
The last of the 17, you know, the last of those 17 values, you know, out there,
yes,
is sustainable development. Are we creating this sustainable society?
Right, thank you.
Yes.
Right, I just want to read out some of the comments that we have on Twitter. Guys are also reacting. Then we'll give you also an opportunity to just react to them as also we prepare our headline thoughts. Let's just begin with, we have Darius Oyaro Mugunde saying corporate governance is worse than electoral injustice and must be included in the handshake deal. This is what Darius is saying. Also, we have Neil Ribeiro is saying, I will have to differ here. I think the lifeblood are its people and culture. Great vision and mission with useless people and culture mean nothing. Didn't Kodak, BlackBerry and Nakumat have great vision and missions? That is what he's asking. Also, we have Kennedy Omoge saying we have gone beyond the red line on corruption. And of course, he's taken a snapshot of today's standard Alama school listing exposes ghost students as well. We have also Rosie Fiyi Baraza saying, very true, it has really spread like bushfire everywhere. It's a pity we have to name it part of our beautiful culture, right? Someone shake his head. Also, we do have Omondi Washington Ocheng saying, I'm enjoying every bit of the topic. We really need to revise on the national values, patriotism, leadership, and integrity. We're running away from this. And then we have Kennedy Atea Boyd said, I agree, Pap. All our problems lie squarely on the leadership. Our leadership is more concerned with keeping it rather than looking for solutions, reasons why someone is sacked as corrupt and then recalled in another capacity, just transferring the vice. Also, we have Sam Aquela saying on corruption-free zone signs, we don't need them because every inch within Kenya is supposed to be a corruption-free zone. So we don't need those corruption-free zones. That is what Sam Aquale is saying. And Andre Nawata, talking about the corporate culture, does the police in any way play the role of an indicator? If so, for whom? A good question he asks. We have also Quintillion Bytes. Vision defines the future of your business and promotes growth, both internally and externally, helps a team focus on what matters the most and invite innovation. Mission defines the purpose and primary objectives related to your customers' needs and your team's values. We have also Ben Nash saying, good morning, enjoying the show and just curious what leaders, whether leaders mislead. And we have also Miss Stacy saying, leadership, you should not expect others to follow any rules or processes if you cannot follow them yourself. And Samuel Orutwa saying, a good leader is one who accepts everybody, even people who don't like him, and one who people who don't like him see him as a good person besides political or ideological differences. Those are just some of your tweets. I cannot be able to read all of them, but we can also just respond to this reactions that we have on Twitter as well, and also as we bring
one of the first,
yes,
one of the first ones you mentioned there was from a guy called Neil Ribeiro. He sort of brought us back to this issue of of culture and the people. Because when we talk about culture, culture is about people. And I think we very quickly and too often slip into coming up with strategies and rules and things that are supposed to somehow get us to where we want to go and forget the people, that it's about the people. Dr. Mashiwa here was giving us 5 I's. I want to add 1 I to this. That is impunity.
Impunity.
The utadu, you know, when you talk about the Volkswagen case or some of the things that are going wrong in society that need to be changed, one of the elephants in the room that we have to deal with is this impunity. Today's Nation, the back page, I'm not here to market the Nation, but the back page is the auditor names state firms looting billions. He lists them, and this is today. I don't know how many of us sitting here expect really heads to roll because of this. Here and there's some token responses to these things, but far and wide, people come to be accustomed to this impunity, that we will get away with it. In fact, this is just news, and it gets shoved away, and another scandal comes up. So this is something that is going to be a process, but we must call a spade, that we have a problem of leadership, a culture in leadership that has taken a space that is unaccountable and have actually glorified this lack of transparency and ability to be able to do what I want to do, knowing that I'm going to get away with it. Yeah.
Dr. Wale.
Well, I agree with the guy that talked about this corruption-free zone thing, because it does drama. If there's no corruption, you don't even need to announce it. And an illustration that I think paints that is when you look at a lot of African presidents, okay? If an African president shows up in a place, you see a lot of police, military, and then the African president has someone standing behind him, you know, throughout, an aide-de-camp, okay? Now, when you look at a US president, you don't see that much drama.
Yes.
But trust me, the security is 100 times more. So we need to build from inside out instead of always doing things from outside in. And that's why I said culture, there is the invisible side of culture and there is the visible part of it. Most organizations focus on the visible side, dress code, floor plan, and all that. We focus on that. But what makes that sustainable is the invisible part. And we are not talking about that. The invisible part, like I said earlier on, is the way we think. Our belief system, which influences our decision making, which influences our behavior as a people.
Right. Okay. Let's see, and of course now you're giving your headline thoughts as well. And just give 30 seconds to each of you.
I think it's where we've ended up is very interesting in that the headlines you were talking about reading, but it just goes back to what we're saying. Yes, it's about people, but at the end, as I always say, it's about the behavior. Because what you see at the end, whatever they're thinking and feeling, comes out in the behavior. So you're really trying to see the people behave. You try and encourage certain behaviors, and it takes over time. So these all headlines we're seeing, we say we value zero corruption. We value good governance here on this constitution, integrity, and so on. But we say it in words, but do we measure it? Do we punish or reward it? If there are no matrix, you remember I said if you don't measure it.
Yes.
If there are no matrix, I remember one time I took all these, the blue pack reports that are done by PSC and PIC in Parliament. If I was trying to see if there's a digitized version, because they name various people through the years, both in government offices as public servants or parastatal heads or whatever, this person should not ever hold a position again. We have all these auditors' reports. If you were to pull out and put it on a matrix over the years, who has been named, then they should not be appointed again. There was a comment there. It means we don't measure, we don't follow. It's not important. So we may say it's a value here, we may say we want zero corruption, but since we don't measure it, either for punishing or for rewarding the good ones, then the message we're giving out is that the behavior is okay. So at the end of the day is ensuring you're producing a certain type of behavior. How do you ensure you do that? By having matrix on them and then rewarding them or punishing them. Because at the end of the day, that's all we have as the outward expression of what people believe and think.
All right, and of course we had a bit saying there, the punishing bits, we just have tokens of them in this country. But how do we then, if we are to also implement the Big Four agenda, you know, try and implement a good sort of a punishable way so that people can have a learning factor from them as well? Briefly, as we're winding up, Dr. Wale.
You know, I'll just say it in two definitions that I have coined. One is my personal definition of democracy. It's where the child of a nobody can become somebody without knowing anybody. Wow. So I say, if Obama ran for president in Kenya instead of America, would he have become president? Then the second definition is what I call a working system. And that is where a somebody who knows everybody can become nobody. Could Jeffrey Archer, politician, millionaire, would he have gone to jail for perjury if he was in Africa? Look at South Korea, what is happening. I was reading in the paper today, Lula da Silva in Brazil.
In Brazil as well.
You know, would he have gone, I mean, would these things have panned out the way they panned out?
South Africa.
Thank God we're seeing what is happening in South Africa. Let's watch it. But until we have a system where nobody can become somebody, and a system where somebody can be brought to nobody in spite of knowing everybody, we're still playing games.
We're still playing games. Wow. Peter Nang.
I just want to underscore this. These are our headline thoughts.
Yes.
I want to go back to where we started this whole conversation. That we cannot purport to be solving societal problems or corporate problems by changing rules and legislating behavior if we do not go back and actually change the heart and the mind of the people. It begins with what we believe, our convictions, and our values. If we can address that, then we have an opportunity to be able to address the ills of society.
Thank you. Mashiwa.
Thank you so much, for the interesting conversation. I think to sum up, this conversation, in my view, the preeminent feature that shapes society, you cannot legislate development. Sorry, cannot. And if narrative be anything to go by, then we need to look up, how Obama moved from, being a junior senator to White House. What is this story we want to tell as body corporate Kenya, and what else that goes with it? So to finally, end my statement, the question is, who determines value? And how should we pursue that value?
Thank you.